Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us at this session today. So my name is Jenny McCauley. I work at the Careers, Employability and Skills Department here at Queen's University, and we are going to be discussing today how to nail a virtual interview, what to do before, during and after to nail that job. So I am joined today by our panellists. We have Chu, Ryan and Pepitha, who are current students, and Norma, who is a recent graduate. I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourself first. So Norma, I'm going to start with you. Norma, could you tell us what you studied and what you're currently doing now?
Hi everyone, my name's Norma Taggart. I did a 3-year undergraduate degree in law at Queen's, and I recently graduated and got a job as a legal analyst with Fintru in Belfast.
Lovely, thank you so much, Norma. Chu, could I ask you to introduce yourself, what you're studying and your level of study?
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Chu, and then I'm originally from Malaysia, and currently I'm in my final year doing my law undergraduate degree in Queen's.
Lovely, Chu, thank you. And Ryan, I'm going to come to you next. Can you introduce yourself, what you're studying and your level of study?
Yep. Hi everyone. I'm in my final year of philosophy. Last year I was on the Study USA program, studying business in Chicago. So yeah.
Lovely, thanks Ryan. And finally, Pepitha, could you introduce yourself, what you're studying, your level of study?
Yes, so hi everyone, my name is Pepitha. So I am currently in my 4th year doing medicine. So yeah.
Perfect, thank you Pepitha. So Chu, I'm going to start with you first, if that's okay. So Chu, could you talk to us a little bit about what your experiences have been of virtual recruitment?
I think it's during the lockdown, so I think it's around June or July. I actually, and at that time, a lot of companies are starting doing their virtual recruitment kind of process. And I applied a job at the Legist, which is, I think, a legal tech startup that kind of promotes legal job. It's like a legal job board advertising kind of legal work. And the whole recruitment process is online. So what I did is I will need to submit my CV and just fill out some application forms online. And after that, I actually got an invitation to attend like a panelist kind of interview. So it's on Zoom at that time. And after that virtual interview, and I managed to kind of start my work virtually with them. And each of us, I think, are based in different areas and different countries. So everything since the first day of work is based online. So that's my kind of experience of undergoing a virtual recruitment during the lockdown.
Lovely, Chu, thank you. And Norma, I'm going to come to you next. Can you again just tell us a little bit about what your experiences have been of virtual recruitment?
In undergraduate, I had one experience with virtual recruitment, and that was for the Global Leadership Program that I was successful in getting a place on. And I think that experience, it was a pre-recorded video interview, and it got me ready for the actual interview I had with Fintru, which was also online. And it consisted of an online application, a telephone interview, and then a video interview over a software called Blue Jeans. My experience with virtual recruitment so far has been very positive. I think it equips you with a lot of different skills that as businesses are transitioning to virtual recruitment and moving away from the traditional style of interviewing, I think they're really going to be looking out for those kind of skills as a graduate or as a student. So it has been very positive so far.
Great, Norma, that's fantastic to hear. So Ryan, I'm going to come to you next. Can you again just give us a little overview of your experiences of virtual recruitment?
Of course. Recently, I was hired by Careers, Employability and Skills Department of Queen's, which involved an online application and an online interview via webcam. And like Norma, I have to say I had a very positive experience and found it rather easy to my surprise. So happy to talk more about that. As well as that, I started a new role with WPU over the summer, which was completely remote as we were in the midst of lockdown. Which took a while to get used to, but it was an interesting experience to say the least, to take on a new project with them entirely virtually. So
that's great, Ryan. Thank you. And Pepitha, if I could come to you and just ask you to talk a little bit about your virtual engagement experiences.
Yeah, sure, Jenny. So I have in medicine in general, you do have a lot of societies, which is like, within Queen's, as well as, national societies. So this year, we do have like, interview, shortlisting, longlisting process going for these societies and the committee roles. This year, it has all been virtual just because, we couldn't go there remotely or do anything, face to face. So I have attended a few of them like that. And in addition, like in medical school, we have clinical exams. So as a study, which is like, very face to face, which is very patient communication based, they had to like, change all the way from like, doing everything face to face to like doing everything virtually. So we have been doing a few of the mock clinical exams as well over them. So that is my experience with virtual engagements. Yeah.
Lovely, Pepita. Thank you. So lots of different experiences there and great to hear positive feedback. So the next question I want to ask you all is, to what extent do you favour virtual recruitment over the traditional recruitment? So if you don't mind, Ryan, I'm going to come to you first for that one.
Yeah, well, I think the time we live in now, because everyone is so COVID conscious, I've had experience with an in-person interview in the last couple of months actually with a business, and everyone was so aware of social distancing and you had to wear a mask and whatnot, and I actually found that quite difficult to express myself fully in the interview wearing a mask. Obviously it's mandatory, but I much prefer the webcam interview because you can read people's facial expressions, they can read yours, you can engage with them better, and to me I found that much more comforting throughout the interview. I felt more comfortable speaking out and talking about my past experience, my past work experience and whatnot. So I like it in that sense. Yeah, it's interesting.
Perfect, Ryan. Thank you very much. And I'm going to come to you next. To what extent do you favour virtual recruitment over traditional recruitment?
I think it's primarily very logistically convenient. Like a lot of our roles, sometimes if we are not applying for a Belfast-based roles, then we need to kind of like fly over to London, or even like the company that I'm working with, they're actually based in London. So without a virtual recruitment process, I may need to even like spend even have travel expenses to fly over there. But because everything is done online, I think it's really helpful and makes it more maybe easy for us to kind of enter into those different industries or different job and roles. And I think just like what Ryan mentioned also, I think it creates a much more kind of less formal vibe throughout the interviews. Like I think when I have my interviews, like everyone is less formal, they are not like fully dressed up, and then we can even have like a very short catch up before we kind of continue with our interview, which I think really helps kind of making me more not nervous, and then just being more open when I share my experiences during the interviews.
That's lovely, Chi, and great point about it being much more accessible with the technology. Pepita, can I come to you next and ask the same question, please? To what extent do you favour the virtual recruitment?
Yes, so like Ryan and Chu said, it is so much more convenient logistically. For example, like if I need to fly over to the mainland to, attend an interview, it's going to be so much more difficult for me. And that means I'm wasting like maybe, a few hours before the interview and a few hours after the interview trying to get there and, sort everything out. The other thing which I like about virtual interviews is just that, when you go for a real interview and when you're going there in person, it's you have to wait around, and that stresses me particularly. Whereas with a virtual interview, you just, you literally go on time and you have the interview and then you're out, which makes it a bit more easier. And, you just get through it quickly. You don't have to be waiting around. That's why I prefer virtual interviews. Yeah.
That's great, Pepita. Yes, as you say, it opens opportunities that might not otherwise be available to you, which is great. And Norma, finally, can I come to you to ask the same question?
I think the virtual recruitment process has surprised me because I do prefer it to traditional recruitment, definitely for all the reasons previously mentioned. I think the flexibility of it is a huge benefit to virtual recruitment because I know personally the external factors such as maybe getting a bus to the interview or what to wear, or even when you're waiting around and you see everybody else with their notes and everything, it stresses me out as well. Whereas with virtual recruitment, all you really have to worry about is your technology that day. But there's loads of things you can do to be prepared for issues like that. So at the end of the day, you just have to focus on your interview and showing your enthusiasm across the webcam, which is sort of one of the only drawbacks of virtual recruitment, where it's kind of difficult to show that you really love the job because you can't convey this in person. But I think if you monitor your body language, you can combat this. But I think virtual recruitment's a lot better for sure.
That's great, Norma. Thank you. So you've all been really positive, which is great. But there is a reality of virtual recruitment that it can be quite daunting. So I just want to reach out to all of you to see what you find most daunting about this virtual recruitment process. And Pepita, can I start with you, please?
Yes, of course. So one of the main things that I find very daunting with virtual interviews is basically the network. Even now, I don't know, I might just go off suddenly just because, the Wi-Fi is not something, which is very reliable sometimes. So that's one thing that I'm very concerned about. The other thing is just that in any interview, let it be virtually or even, in-person interviews, I find my throat drying out so badly. And I just stop talking sometimes. So that's one thing that I found very difficult with virtual interviews in particular, because, the whole screen is you. People are just looking at you. And, if you make a mistake, it does become a bit scary. But the good thing with that is that, you can always have a bottle of water beside you and you can just drink. That kind of helps too. So, yeah.
That's great, Pepita. Thank you. And Norma, can I come to you next to see what you find most daunting about the virtual recruitment process?
Like Pepita said, I think that the technological issues is definitely something that's daunting because I know my Wi-Fi personally is constantly cutting out. Another thing I found daunting was drawing a blank when someone asks you a question, because with traditional interviews, you are in the mindset all day that this is your interview, you've been practicing. So when you get there, you know what to say. Whereas in video interviews, you're at home and you might not be in the mindset to answer questions, so you can have a drawback. But I think one of the benefits of virtual recruitment is that you can have your CV and your notes to hand. So if you just remember to have them somewhere close by, so if you do draw a blank, you can take a moment, have a deep breath and start again. But, yeah.
That's great, Norma. Thank you. Chu, can I ask you the same question?
Oh, okay. Yes, I think for myself, like technological part is the thing that I'm always worried about. Is like sometimes my mic don't work or even the Wi-Fi. But aside of that, I think I'm also kind of like, I just feel that sometimes when it comes to virtual interviews, it's very hard to read facial expressions and it's very hard to gauge people's emotions, which I think sometimes it's a big part of how I decide what's the right answer to a question, or should I continue on this answer, or should I just change it, or should I just change the topic and everything. So I think like a lot of times people, like some of my I think I attended one that they don't even switch on their video or something, like there's someone sitting in which I don't know who are they and then why are they there and everything. So I think it's a lot of those kind of like worries and uncertainties that sometimes makes you really nervous. So I think that's the daunting part that I would say during attending a virtual interview.
Of course, thanks, Chu. Yes, it's difficult when you can't gauge the reaction of a room over a camera. So that's a really good point. Ryan, can I come to you finally just to ask what you find daunting about the virtual recruitment process?
Yeah, just to build on what you said, eye contact is very difficult over a webcam. Like right now, I don't really know who's looking at who. I'm assuming you're looking at my window, but that's hard to gauge. And I remember always being told, make eye contact in an interview. So that's quite difficult. But I think the most daunting thing for me is that because it's so much more accessible and it doesn't really matter as such about location, I always assume there's going to be more applicants and it's going to be more competitive. So you really have to try and show your enthusiasm on the video interview. You really have to try and express yourself really well and come across as the best possible candidate, because there may be far more candidates than in a traditional recruitment process. So that's something I'm always kind of mindful of and that's pretty daunting to say the least.
That's great, Ryan. Thank you very much. So the next question I'm going to move on to now is, what did you all find most surprising about your virtual recruitment experiences? So, Pepita, can I come to you first for that one?
Yes. So before I had like my first virtual interview, I thought that the only thing you could do with a virtual interview is just talk to like, a few people. But then what I learned is that you can actually do so much more with, virtual recruitment or interviews. You can have like breakout rooms and you can separate into like, groups, and then like have like mini sessions where, you could talk about like a case or like, particular scenario, and then you could just move around and then do the same again. For example, in medicine, we have this called MMI, which is multiple mini interviews. So basically we go around, doing like different stations at a time, which I think is easily done with, any online platform, which I found very surprising because it was not something I thought we could do before I actually had the first one.
That's great, Pepita. Thank you. And can I go to Ryan next? Can we ask you the same question? What did you find most surprising?
Yeah, I think I was surprised at how easy I found it, really, because in the beginning I was quite skeptical of the whole virtual recruitment process and remote working. But once you get your head around it, like Pepita said, breakout rooms and such, they are very practical, they're very useful. I was a bit skeptical of, multiple people in a room, a virtual room, so to speak, talking over each other or not really being able to speak. But you do get used to it, and yeah, I was surprised at how easy it was. You come to terms with it, and it becomes second nature, really, over time.
That's great to hear, Ryan. And finally, Norma, can I ask you the same question? What did you find surprising about the process?
I think I'm the same as Ryan, that I was surprised by how comfortable I felt and how easy it really was in the end, because in the days leading up to the video interview, I was worried about all the issues I previously mentioned. But once you get started, it surprises me how adaptable you become and how used to the online environment you get. And it just becomes a lot easier, and it's a lot more informal, as Chu said. So if you click into the link early, you can have a catch up with your employers and have some small talk, and then the interview starts. So I think it is a lot more welcoming than traditional interviews, which surprised me.
That's great, Norma. Thank you. So the next question, Chu, I'm going to ask you this one first, and it's time to own up to what mistakes have you made in the virtual recruitment process?
Yeah, I think because building up from what I say, it's quite hard to kind of gauge people's reactions. I think during the interview part for myself, I'm not too sure if I got too nervous or I got too comfortable in during the interview. So eventually, I realized that I sometimes speak too much, or I just realized that even the interviewers sometimes they will also speak too much. So it's like I think people just can't. It's very hard for us to decide when is like the stopping point, when is enough to kind of like answer your questions, and then when is actually when should you actually elaborate more. So I think that's actually my part, that I think if I'm given like a second chance, I will actually maybe try my best to even write my answers beforehand, or roughly I know like what is the ideal length of an answer, so that whenever questions come in, I roughly know that okay, how long should I say this, and I should not waffle, and then I should just force myself to stop if it's too long and everything, just to make sure my answers and my presentations wouldn't be too boring or wouldn't be like too lengthy when it comes to the interview. So yeah, I think that's my mistake that I realized.
Lovely, Chu. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, it's difficult when people are turning their microphones on and off to know whether it's an awkward silence or whether they want to ask you a little bit more, isn't it?
Yeah.
So thank you, Norma. I'm going to ask you the same question. Have you made any mistakes during the virtual recruitment process?
I did, yes. I made a very basic practical mistake, which was when I got invited for the video interview, I assumed that the call would be over Zoom or something similar. So I think the interview started about 4:30, and at 4:25, I decided to click the link, which brought up a box to download the software. And my Wi-Fi is not great, so I knew the download was going to take a while. And thankfully, it only took a few minutes to download and I was able to enter the call. But the stress I felt downloading the software kind of threw me off. I was successful in the end, obviously, but in the beginning of the interview, all I could think of was, is this software going to download? Am I going to get there on time? Am I going to be late? So I think if you are conscious of the fact that there's different softwares out there now, like that one was Blue Jeans, but there's also Zoom, Webinar, Teams. So if you make sure that you have the software downloaded before your interview, then you can come in a bit earlier, get yourself relaxed, meet the employer, and you're not running around stressed trying to download software. But that was my mistake.
That's great advice, Norma. Thank you for that. Okay, so the next question we're going to move on to is the preparation element. So how would you prepare if you were doing it again for a virtual interview, and how is that different from a traditional interview? Apologies, sorry. I'm going to address that question to Pepita.
Yeah, so you just heard us tell, all the mistakes that we have made. So basically lessons that we have learned from that, like I will always make sure that I, click the link and see what it is at least half an hour before the interview. I would preferably do it like, when they send you the email, just to, make sure everything is all right. You never know. Sometimes you could just miss a letter in the link and then it doesn't work. I need to let them know, if it doesn't work. And then I would also join the meeting at least 10 minutes before, just in case, there's something else, like, there's some issues with my camera, or if there's something wrong with like my microphone or anything like that. And then the other thing is just that, to keep your notes with you. And then do not let other softwares be open or other apps be open at the same time. For example, my mail just goes off, and then you just hear all the noise coming off whenever I'm speaking. As an interview, I wouldn't like that. So when I do a virtual interview, I would not want to have like background noise. So yeah.
That's great, Pepita. Yes, as fewer distractions as possible. So can I pass that on then to Norma? Can we hear about what you did or what you would do if you were doing it again?
What I did to prepare for the virtual interview that was different to traditional interviews was, because I was at home, I had to set up a space where I knew I'd have no distractions. I knew this wall behind me was blank. You couldn't see anything untidy. I made sure to check my internet connection, my microphone, my camera, because I think it just shows the employer that you're taking it seriously. Because if they can see distractions or hear things in the background, or maybe they can't see you properly because you don't have good lighting, that'll just throw off the interview and they might not listen to you clearly. So I think dealing with the external factors is important. And then also in preparation for the interview, just as Pepita said, have your notes nearby, have your CV nearby, just in case you draw a blank, because in traditional interviews, you obviously can't have your notes there. So you might as well take that to your advantage and have them nearby. But definitely deal with external factors so that you can just focus on the questions at hand without thinking of maybe there's noise in the background or do I look appropriate and things like that.
That's great, Norma. Thank you. And Ryan, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, just sort of echo what Pepita and Norma have said already. Get the camera up on your laptop before you go into your interview. Check your surroundings, check your lighting. If you need to close blinds or whatever. If you have wireless headphones like AirPods like mine, make sure they're charged, because I've been in a conference call before when they've died, and it's very embarrassing because it messes up your mic and stuff, and it's quite embarrassing. So make sure your gadgets are charged if need be. But other than that, I suppose try and prepare your notes well, try and know exactly what you're applying for, know the job, and prepare questions too for the employers. Because it can be quite hard to gauge a workplace or an organization when you're not in that environment. So prepare some questions too that you think would benefit you at the end of the interview.
That's great, Ryan. Thank you. And Chu, I'm going to ask you the same question. So how did you prepare for a virtual interview? And also, Chu, if you don't mind, I'd love to draw a little bit upon some of the things that you have done in this virtual environment that you've been able to speak about in the virtual interview, if that's okay.
Oh, okay, sure. I think Yeah, besides the kind of like the gadget part of it, I think the content and the preparation is quite similar with how I would prepare like in a real life interview. And in terms of like interview questions, I just realized there's like a trend even during my interview. People will usually ask you like how comfortable you are working remotely, and then how comfortable you are working with your team or with team members who are actually based in maybe different jurisdictions, different time zones, and how would you try your best to kind of make sure you stay productive even you're working at home? So I think those questions would really be important. Like at least you kind of prepare and think about it before you attend those interviews, because those will really help you answer some questions, which I think is very relevant during these times. And I think for myself, this is also something that I did during my last interview, is that I actually emailed them. So they just sent me an like interview request. It's, I would say, quite general. So just say that there's an interview scheduled. So I actually replied and asked them what kind of questions that you will ask. I think it's not about precisely what questions, but I just asked them like, would it be competency based questions or would it be kind of like situational based questions? So roughly I know what I should prepare. And because when it comes to competency and everything, so I can prepare on some stories or some kind of examples and everything. And if it's situational, then I may need to derive on the it will be a totally different preparation kind of process. So that's, I think, what really helped me to kind of prepare myself before the interview. I kind of foresee what is going to happen during the interview, and everything kind of like went out quite smoothly. So I think these are the tips that I will kind of share with everyone, and and what really helped me during the lockdown.
Gee, that's great. Thank you so much. So the next question I want to ask is if any of you can see any limitations to virtual recruitment. I know we've touched on it a little bit in terms of gauging the energy in the room, but if there's any other limitations that you could call out, that would be great. So Norma, can I come to you with this one?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest limitations is, as previously mentioned, just the impersonal feel of a webcam sometimes. I know a lot of people do well in interviews because they can convey body language and they can convey enthusiasm and their love for the industry. But if you aren't used to the process and you're finding it really daunting, your own nervousness can limit you sometimes, because you go into it feeling, will they remember me if I don't make eye contact? Will they remember me if it's not in person? I can't shake their hand. But I think if you just put that out of your mind and try not to let your nervousness take hold of you, then you can do away with these limits of virtual recruitment and really start to enjoy it.
That's great, Norma. Thank you. Nice to hear you mention enjoying it, which is great. Ryan, can I ask you the same question and what you feel the limitations of virtual recruitment would be?
Yeah, so I touched on it in the last question about gauging, the kind of environment you're going to be working in. If it does happen to be in person, but also gauging relationships with your colleagues, because so many employees now are not in every day, all week. They're taking turns week by week or whatever coming in. You might not see certain people a lot of the time, and that can be quite tough. So forging relationships is slightly more difficult. You might not meet them in person for quite a substantial period of time, and that's totally new territory for everybody. But luckily, most workplaces seem to be adapting in the sense that they're creating virtual social events, and sort of Norma touched on it too. If you do find it daunting, it's just a matter of trying to put yourself out there and try and engage as much as possible. You do have to make an effort to get to know your colleagues, because social interactions are limited. And as we all know, that's a big part of work. So yeah, it's about trying to put yourself out there insofar as possible, as much as you can online. But it's new for everybody, so.
That's great, Ryan. And yes, that's a really good point, because the virtual recruitment process is the first step, but actually some of you may be entering into a virtual induction and working virtually. So these are all skills that have to be learned. So Norma, I just want to throw that one back to you, because obviously you've been working in a virtual environment in your job at Fintru. So could you talk to us a little bit about that experience and how you found it and what you've done to really help you get to know your colleagues and break down some of these barriers virtually?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really, really good point. And it's a skill that if you have the ability to develop it in your undergraduate, to kind of be confident online, that it'll really help you when you're remote working. Remote working has really surprised me because, as Ryan said, I went in with a cohort of 24 other people to do an analyst job in Finchu, and we've never met. I've been working with them for about 3 months now, but I feel as if they're all really good friends. I think it is just putting yourself out there, and there is a lot of benefits to remote working, such as going into Finchu, I knew a few people. So I think if it was the more traditional work environment, coming into induction, you would definitely stick to the people you knew. You would kind of form cliques maybe, and if you're put with other people, you would speak to them, maybe a bit of small talk, but you wouldn't really get to know them. Whereas when you're remote working, you're put into breakout rooms with different people every single day. And because you feel more comfortable, you chat away to them, you don't feel intimidated. You get to know every single person on your team, which is really great. The only difficulty is the lack of social interaction. As Ryan said, it can be quite isolating sometimes, but Finchu has been really great because they organise different socials, different quizzes online. So remote working is definitely not something to find challenging or scary, because you really do make amazing friends online. And I do think it is easier to make friends online because you are a lot more confident at a screen. And then when you do meet in person, it'll feel like you knew each other forever. So that's great.
Norma, that's great to hear that experience. So thank you very much to all of you. I'm going to come to you just to ask for one last bit of advice you would give the students listening today about the virtual recruitment process. So can I start with you, Chu, with that one?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's a nice starting first, so that I will kind of like cover everyone's point. So I think my kind of advice is just be courageous enough. I think everyone is on the same boat, like what Ryan mentioned. Like if you are feeling worried, then so as your maybe competitors or anyone else who is applying for the job. So just, I think, be very courageous, and then just try to express yourself. Prepare for the kind of interviews and everything, but just express yourself genuinely during the interviews, and I believe you will be able to kind of like be your best self, and hopefully you can get the job that you really want.
Chu, that's lovely. Thank you very much. And Pepita, what bit of advice would you give our students today?
So for many people who will be doing virtual interviews, it'll be your first time doing it, and it might be for something which is very important for you. It can be daunting, but I would recommend just taking a step back and think about it. Like, everyone wants to mimic a in-person interview. That's why that's basically what they want to do with a virtual interview. So revise, like practice questions, like Stu said, like you would do for an in-person interview. And then once you're confident with that, then go through the logistics, with the technical issues with like virtual interviews. Like, make sure you have like good Wi-Fi connection, and then like, you make sure you check the link properly, make sure your camera is working, make sure you have like a good microphone, stuff like that. And then always, if during your interview you just blank out, take a deep breath in and then just like think about it. This could happen even in an in-person interview. It's not something that'll only happen with a virtual interview. It's just that with a virtual interview, you'll have more time because you'll at least have like some props or like prompts like beside you, which could help you, prompt you to like talk more. And always like, have something, when you have a break or something, just make sure you go and get, water and stuff like that, just to keep you going.
Pepita, thank you so much. Some great advice there. Ryan, can I come to you next for your little bit of advice?
Yeah, just don't worry. As I said before, we're all in the same boat. It's new territory for everyone. And the chances are that the person on the other end of the line, the interviewer, is in new territory as well. This is an exceptional year for recruitment across all sectors. So everybody's readjusting. But don't worry and be yourself, and do as you would in a traditional recruitment process or a traditional interview. Sell yourself and play to your strengths, and try and be confident that you are the best candidate for the job. So yeah, don't worry.
That's great advice, Ryan. Thank you so much. And Norma, finally, can we come to you for your last bit of advice?
I think my best piece of advice is to use Queen's Careers team. Throughout my undergrad, I was very engaged with everything going on at Queen's, and I fully credit Queen's Careers team for me getting the job at Vintru. I think get involved early and get involved actively. Do employer panels, CV sessions, book a careers consultation. So then when it comes time for your virtual interview, you know you have the skill set to adapt and you know your content is ready to go. Because attending different grad fairs and events really made me confident to sort of adapt to different things and know that I could succeed in the virtual recruitment process.
Norma, that's great. Thank you so much. And great that you've referenced how the careers team have helped you. Our careers team are here available today at the fair. You can visit the Career Zone. And also, as Norma said, you can book an appointment to see our careers consultants through My Future. I'm going to let you into a little secret. I've recently been on the other end of interviewing. I've been interviewing people. And as Ryan said, I've got to admit that often the person who's interviewing is just as nervous about the technology and about all of the other concerns that you have at the other side of it. So thank you very much to all of you for sharing all that advice today. I'm sure it will be really helpful to the students. So thank you, Norma. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Ju. And thank you, Pepita. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.